I hope you're all doing really well. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a really exciting video for me to film because it's all about books and I am a self-confessed bookworm. I love everything books. One day I want to have a house with a massive library, Beauty and the Beast style, books galore. So I wanted to film a video based on two books that I've recommended on my Instagram. And if you guys like this, or if I enjoy filming it, putting it together, and I get like feedback that I can kind of vibe off, then I will create more videos. But so far from the feedback on Instagram, this seems like a kind of video that you will enjoy, and I will enjoy too, filming. I think what I'll do is now and then after my book recommendations on Instagram, I'll film like a corresponding video on YouTube, and so we can create kind of a book club, Amena's book club. So welcome, have a seat. These videos will contain spoilers, by the way. So if you don't want to know what's going to happen in a book or the details of what a book is about, then these videos won't be for you. Let's jump right in. There's two books that I recommended on Instagram recently. One is called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, this book right here. And the other book is actually an audiobook because I love listening to books as well. The other book, I'm going to open it on Audible, is a book called The Deepest Well, and it's by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. There we go. And this book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, is by Dr. Bruce Perry, who I hugely adore and admire the work that they're both doing, actually. They're both doing really inspirational work that I think is crucial. They're doing the real important, tough work in working at grassroots level and creating real change in society, because I believe real change starts with the individual. And when you address the individual challenges that people face at a very young age, by helping them to overcome that, you really influence and impact that individual's life long term, really for the rest of their lives. And so therefore you're indirectly affecting the lives of everybody that individual will encounter throughout their lives. And so this is the real ripple effect that I believe will transform society. This is really where our efforts should be focused, and it's part of the reason why I always emphasize self-love and self-growth, because I truly believe that change begins with the individual. So I'm going to start off with this book. I'm going to talk to you about it, and like even just reflecting on some of the cases which I've reread and I've re-listened to both of these books quite a few times over the past few weeks, just because I find that there tends to be overlap. I'm reading this stuff and I'm reading other stuff as well, which I'll mention kind of down the line, but I seem to be finding these cross links and these overlaps, and one theory explains the other or expands on the other, and I just find all of this stuff so deliciously fascinating. And so when I think about some of the cases in this book, I feel so emotional, so moved. Just the intricacies of human relationships, it's just mind-blowing to me, and the impact that such seemingly small changes can make to the development of a human being, and how they interact with the world, and how they experience life, and the quality of their life, and the capacity that they have to experience joy and healing. Like all of that is so deeply woven into how we relate to one another and the relationships that we build with one another, and our very early childhood experiences is just, again, it's just, to me, it's mind-blowing stuff. So in The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, you get Dr. Perry presenting to you various cases of child development and child trauma. And then he kind of goes into how that child was kind of healed in a way. The steps that they took to bring that child's neurobiology back to a regulated state. Let me read the back of the book. So it says, how does trauma affect a child's mind? And how can traumatized children recover? In the classic The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, great title by the way, right? Dr. Perry explains what happens inside the brains of children exposed to extreme stress, and shares their lessons of courage, humanity, and hope. Only when we understand the science of the mind and the power of love and nurturing can we hope to heal the spirit of even the most wounded child. So immediately your heart goes out to the children in these books, you guys. I was literally crying. Like, the adversity that some souls go through, and the inspiring and strong and courageous way in which they heal. And just human beings, we're built to withstand so much pain, emotional pain, physical pain, mental pain. And the way that our brains and our bodies have been built to adapt to that trauma in order to allow us to survive is so unique and is so, to me, it gives me hope. It's a very hopeful way to look at life. The fact that we have this internal built-in ability to persevere through the most difficult of things. And when you read the stories of these children, oh my God, it just perfectly illustrates how great human beings are, right? And like how we've been created to overcome the stresses and the strains of life, even when they are the most horrific. So he goes through these cases, and to me, it's pertinent that we understand extreme cases of trauma, not only because as caregivers, like as parents, we can look to parent from that perspective of child healing, but also in our day-to-day jobs, if we're carers, if we work as teachers. I was a teacher, and this, to me, I've always had a certain understanding of the difficulties of what some children go through, especially the children that are coming from the most deprived areas of society, not just financially deprived, but emotionally deprived. But also as non-parents or non-carers, to understand the human brain and how it is affected by early childhood trauma is, I think, enlightening for every individual on this planet, because we were all children once, right? So this is totally relevant to every single one of us. These cases, you guys, God, I want to say so much about this. It's one of those books that you just want to, you know, like you spend all night with a cup of tea talking to somebody who's also read the book, and you're like, oh my God, and what did you get? What did you get? What did you? It's like totally the kind of book that you bounce off other people with. God, where do I begin? So one of the cases, I'm just gonna, this is the case that really just like shook me. And I had to put the book down, and I had to like take a moment with myself and process what I was reading and what I was understanding. It's like a novel. It's like you just get drawn, your emotions get drawn in. So it's not just an academic book. It really is, it reads like a story, but you know it's a real life story, so you're just completely hooked. So one of the first cases that really shook me was of this little girl who witnesses her mother being murdered and also gets attacked in the process. Her mother gets murdered in front of her, and then the murderer also slits her neck. This little child, right, who doesn't understand what's going on. And so she thinks her mom's sleeping, and they only find her like ages later. And during that experience, so she witnesses that, and then she has her throat slit, and then she goes to the fridge and tries to drink milk, and the milk starts to like leak out of her throat. And that whole experience, the way that her brain stores that memory and how that trauma affects that child later, it's just like goosebumps, you guys. So the child obviously then has that connection with milk. He takes these stories, and then he unpacks how the brain stores that memory and how it impacts the child once that traumatic episode is over, as life goes on. So the associations that child's brain then makes with milk, like how that child's development is affected. God, I need to hang on. I need to come back on track, because I just keep getting lost in the, I guess, the memory of reading this book, ironically. Let me just read out a bit of this. So in this case, they were trying to ascertain whether this child was a suitable witness for the case against the alleged murderer. And so Dr. Perry was, I believe, brought in to assess whether or not she was a credible witness. So let me go over this again. I said, a 3-year-old girl witnesses her mother being raped and murdered. She has her own throat cut twice and is left for dead. She is alone with her dead mother's body for 11 hours in their apartment. Then she's taken to the hospital and has the wounds on her neck treated. In the hospital, the physicians recommend ongoing mental health evaluation and treatment. But after she's released, she's placed in a foster home as a ward of the state. Her CPS, which is Child Protective Services, caseworker doesn't think she needs to see a mental health professional. So despite the doctor's recommendations, he doesn't get her any help. For 9 months, this child is moved from foster home to foster home with no counselling or psychiatric care whatsoever. And the details of the child's experiences are never shared with the foster families because she's in hiding, right? Yeah, I guess all of that is true, he said, hearing the unmistakable frustration in my voice and how terrible it all sounded when I described the situation so bluntly. And now, 10 days before a murder trial is scheduled to start, you become aware of the situation? Right, he admitted, sheepish now. So basically that's what they're trying to figure out, whether this child is actually like emotionally equipped and ready to handle that type of further stress of being a witness in the court case. So that's one case. Okay, so the other case, I have to move on because I'm totally aware that I can keep going on and on and on about books. This will be a couple of hours long. And so the other case which really shook me, like I was like, oh my God, because I'm interested, I watched like the Ted Bundy documentary on Netflix. It's just been Netflix all round, a while ago, a couple of months ago, I think. And then I watched, God, what else did I watch? Like I'm always watching like real crime series stuff, and so I was getting into debates with people who've watched the documentary about like what makes a psychopath. Like how does psychopathy develop in a human being? Like is there an internal like switch that goes on? Is everybody born with that chip, that potential to become a psychopath? Are they like, is it genetic or like, what is it? I'm so fascinated with all of that, like the genetics and the environment. So the other case is of Leon, all right? Whew, you guys, this case. All right, so the case of Leon is Dr. Perry visits this young boy or young man in prison. His name is Leon. He uses pseudonyms throughout. And he visits Leon because Leon's just committed a horrific double murder. It's gruesome, he did it unabashedly, he doesn't seem to show any remorse, he's described as a very cold person, clearly a psychopath. And oh my God, I just keep getting goosebumps. So then he goes through the details of the case, which are, I'm not going to go into the details of the case. And then, you know, he's trying to figure out how did this child, essentially, he's a young person, come to commit these atrocious acts, right? Like, you want to know, how do you get from that to that? Like, what happened to this person? And these are he commits the murder on two girls that he doesn't know. Like, they haven't done anything to him, per se. It's just done, like, it's cold-blooded murder. So Dr. Perry talks to his parents who are brought in, and he has a brother too, so he compares the upbringing of both the boys, and he interviews the parents to figure out like what happened, what were the differences in the way in which these kids were raised, their early childhood experiences. They're trying to piece together the puzzle, right, of what happened. So listen to this. His mum is Maria and the dad is, I don't know, but the brother is Frank, all right? So listen to this. So Maria, the way she's described, his mum, is she's just like an unassuming, very like naive, I think he describes her as not being very intelligent, but she's like harmless. She's not a malicious woman, and she's very young when she has her first baby, and then they move houses and she has Leon, and so she's a very young woman who's incredibly overwhelmed with these two kids, who kind of enjoyed the experience of raising the first baby because there was a support system in place there. There were friends that were nearby, I believe, who would come over and helped babysit, and she felt supported as a mother. She didn't feel that she was overwhelmed, and the environment was completely different. Then she had a second baby. They moved away. She didn't really have friends. She didn't have help with the baby. She was sleep deprived. Her firstborn was also quite young, and she basically couldn't handle the new neediness of a newborn, which is completely normal and expected, and that's just what newborns are. Their middle name is neediness. And so listen to this, you guys. Woo-hoo-hoo. Good stuff. He was such a fussy baby. So she's talking about Leon. He was such a fussy baby. He cried, Maria told me, describing Leon. She smiled. I smiled back. And how would you calm him down? I tried to feed him. Sometimes he would take the bottle and stop. Anything else? Sometimes he would not stop, so we would go on our walk. We? Me and Frank. Ah, Frank's the firstborn. Did anyone ever come to help you take care of Leon? No, we would wake up and feed him and then go for our walk. Was this like the walks you took before Leon was born? Because her and Frank, the firstborn, used to go on walks. Yes, we go to the park, play for a while, take the bus to the church and have lunch, and then go to the children's museum, take the bus to the market to buy food for dinner, and then go home. So you were gone most of the day? Yes. Little by little it became clear that from the time Leon was 4 weeks old, the mother had resumed her walks with her oldest son, by then a 4-year-old. She left baby Leon alone in a dark apartment. My heart sank as I listened to the mother, innocent yet ignorant of the crucial needs of an infant, describe her systematic neglect of her youngest son. It was hard to be critical. She had given her 4-year-old loving and attentive care, but at the same time she had deprived her newborn of the experiences necessary for him to form and maintain healthy relationships. This 4-year-old baby is left in a dark apartment because he doesn't have that attentive, empathic face around him for much of his crucial developmental stage of the brain. That baby's part of the brain, this is so interesting, that is basically like the empathy center, right? The connections in your brain that are needed for empathy, they never form. Because the way that our brain develops is very much use dependent. So if a certain part of the brain is not used, that part will not develop. So this baby's empathic part of the brain never develops. That's why he comes off as cold, and that's essentially why he turns into a psychopath. That's like the theory behind it. And so Dr. Perry, I mean, that's just one case, and the way that he builds it all is just like, it's chilling. That part is so chilling, so I kind of ruined it for you, but you know, still read it. I'm sure you'll still be moved by the whole thing. But he really talks about how when there is relational deprivation, when crucial, loving relationships are not present in our life, our brain, neurobiologically, so not just the brain, the neuro part of us, our biology changes, our physiology changes, the way that we interact with the world changes, our ability to be kind and compassionate changes, purely because we were deprived of that at a certain age. And this is not like, the book is not about blaming people, right? Like, he doesn't blame Maria, and I don't blame her, right? When you read it, you just realize, wow, this woman's just like completely ignorant of what's happened. And I guess that's why child services, these, you know, child protective services or therapy and, you know, these counseling programs and various programs that are in place to help children who have been through extreme trauma or deprivation, that's why they're so crucial, because there's only so much you can do to help to prevent this type of upbringing. Because what can you do, right? If parents are ignorant, if they don't know better, then there's no chance for that young child. And it feels so, at times, guys, it feels so unfair. But for me personally, it's an opportunity for me to tap into my spirituality and that part of who I am, to try to process and understand it when these cases, some of them are just so cruel and unfair. Your heart just goes out to these people and you just want to do something about it, right? You want to just like adopt all these children. And there's this amazing character called Mama P in the book, who, I'm saying video because I'm thinking of that not Practical Magic, that's a movie with Sandra Bullock. Just Add Magic, Alina's watching Just Add Magic, there's a Mama P there. But no, there's a Mama P character in this book who basically addresses skin hunger. There's a chapter called Skin Hunger, of children who aren't held enough, because with the case of Leon, he just isn't held and nurtured enough, right? And as human beings, touch is an incredibly important part of how we heal and how we relate to people, and the way that we build these very crucial relationships, particularly with our primary caregivers in our very early years of life. Our capacity to be humane and to have empathy is largely set in our very early years of life. Now, that's not to say that that can't be built and developed later in life. So the human brain is malleable, and that's the incredible part of science and just all of this stuff that they're discovering now, where the brain has this feature of neuroplasticity, which means it can change and new synapses can be built, and there is hope for everybody Because, you know, there's people who are like, you know, I want to care, but I just don't have that thing in me. Like, what's going on? You know, and I think that these sorts of books really shed an important and powerful light on how we are shaped as human beings. Why it is that some people have the ability to be so incredibly cruel and harsh and even evil in some cases, and others don't. And like, there's a spectrum, and some kind of do and don't, and some switch between the two, and for some therapy helps and for some it doesn't, and some are just cold-hearted killers and psychopaths and some aren't, or whatever, you know, like it just explains the whole human spectrum, and it's just really, really interesting. And so, yeah, it doesn't just address the cases, it also addresses how we can go about building healthy, positive, relational healing. And it is all through relationships. That's how we heal. And I guess inward searching of the answers, right? Because he has to explore each case and the history of each person. All right, I have to move on now. So I'm now going to move on to The Deepest Well by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. I've